crisp, cool air of the Alps carried the scent of pine forests and melting glacier streams. In the gentle morning sunlight, the Mont Blanc Royal Resort stood like a castle amidst the majestic natural landscape. This was the perfect retreat for the wealthy seeking tranquility and luxury. In the most luxurious suite of the resort, Alexander Grant, the CEO of a leading global tech conglomerate, sat at a desk made of expensive walnut wood. His face, familiar from the covers of business magazines, was now contemplative and weary. His deep-set eyes mirrored the turmoil within his mind. Pressures from the board of directors, billion-dollar deals, and a high-profile divorce that had been the subject of relentless media gossip for the past year. Alexander was no longer a man who easily showed emotion. He had built a cold, impenetrable facade, keeping everyone at a distance. In another corner of the resort, Sophie Hart, a 24-year-old with soft brown hair and striking blue eyes, was busy with her tasks. Having grown up in a small rural village, Sophie had come here hoping to earn enough to pursue her dream of becoming an interior designer. She worked diligently, driven not just by duty but by a genuine passion for discovering beauty. The meticulously designed spaces within the resort often made her pause momentarily to admire them, drawing inspiration for the unfinished sketches she kept in her ever-present notebook. That morning, Sophie was assigned to clean the resort's most luxurious suite, the one where Alexander was staying. With years of experience, she knew to maintain a professional demeanor in any situation. She knocked lightly on the door, and when there was no response, she entered and began her work. Unexpectedly, Alexander emerged from the bedroom, his white shirt partially unbuttoned, revealing a glimpse of his toned physique. His piercing gaze locked onto Sophie, momentarily unsettling her, though she quickly composed herself. "Who are you?" His deep voice resonated, carrying a mix of weariness and irritation. "Apologies, sir. I'm the housekeeper. I thought the room was unoccupied," Sophie replied, her eyes fixed on the floor to avoid his intense stare. Alexander frowned slightly but said nothing more. Instead, he settled onto the sofa, picked up a newspaper, and continued reading, as if Sophie's presence was inconsequential. But Sophie wasn't one to fade into the background. While tidying up, she noticed a painting hanging askew on the wall and instinctively adjusted it. "This angle makes the space feel unbalanced," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else, unaware that Alexander had overheard her. "What did you say?" he asked, looking up, a hint of curiosity flickering in his eyes for the first time. "It's just, the painting should be aligned to complement the room's architectural lines," Sophie replied, her tone sincere but unflinching. Alexander allowed a faint smile to surface, something that had become rare for him lately. "You're interested in design?" "It's my dream," she said, her eyes lighting up as she spoke about her passion. For the first time in months, Alexander felt a small warmth seep into his otherwise cold and distant soul. There was something about this young woman, her honesty, intelligence, and pure passion, that he couldn't ignore. Though it was just a brief moment, that encounter planted a seed in Alexander's heart. Little did he know Sophie, the young woman from a tranquil village, would change his life in ways he could never have anticipated. Welcome to today's story. Let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to never miss out on meaningful stories like this one. Chapter 1. The Initial Bond. The cool afternoon at Mont Blanc Royal Resort brought sunlight dancing across the large glass windows, reflecting the majestic mountain scenery outside. Sophie was meticulously cleaning the items in Alexander Grant's suite, a space where every detail of the decor exuded luxury and elegance. Despite trying to remain calm, she couldn't shake the invisible pressure of being in the domain of someone as powerful as Alexander. As Sophie wiped the dust off a shelf near the window, she didn't notice a gold-plated antique vase precariously perched at the edge. While turning, her cleaning cloth accidentally snagged the vase's edge. Before she could react, it tumbled to the ground, shattering with a resounding crash. Sophie froze, her heart pounding. She knelt to pick up the shards, silently chastising herself for her carelessness. Before she could finish, Alexander entered the room. His sharp gaze swept over the scene, and Sophie realized there was no hiding what had happened. "What happened here?" Alexander asked, his deep voice resonating with authority. Sophie took a deep breath, clutching the cleaning cloth tightly in her trembling hands. I I accidentally broke the vase. I'm very sorry. It wasn't intentional. Instead of the anger she braced herself for, Alexander looked surprised. His piercing eyes studied her, as though trying to see through her honesty. That was a valuable antique, he said, his tone calm but serious. Why didn't you try to cover it up? Sophie raised her head, her eyes shining with sincerity. I thought it would be better to be honest and find a way to make amends than to lie. I deeply regret damaging your item. Her calm and graceful response caught Alexander off guard. Do you even know the value of that vase? He asked. Sophie swallowed nervously, unwilling to guess. Probably worth more than a year of my salary, she admitted, but I'm willing to work overtime to repay it. Alexander remained silent for a few moments before unexpectedly laughing. It was the first time Sophie had seen him smile, a gentle smile that momentarily softened his usually stern face. All right, you won't have to repay it, he said, but I do have a request. Sophie was taken aback. What kind of request, sir? You seem to have a good eye for aesthetics, he replied, a hint of amusement in his gaze. I've been considering redesigning some areas of the resort. Perhaps you could help me with a few ideas. The suggestion left Sophie stunned. Part of her felt unqualified for such an important task, but another part of her was thrilled at the opportunity to showcase her talent. She took a deep breath, thought for a moment, and nodded. I'll give it a try. In the days that followed, Sophie and Alexander began spending more time together, discussing ideas for renovating the resort. Sophie proposed small but creative suggestions, such as incorporating design elements that highlighted the natural beauty of the Alps or using eco-friendly materials. Alexander, who initially observed and assessed her from a distance, gradually became captivated by her enthusiasm and deep understanding of design. One afternoon, as they sat by the fireplace sketching ideas, Sophie asked curiously, "Why do you want to renovate this space? It already seems perfect." Alexander looked at her, his gaze distant for a moment. Perfection is only on the surface, he said. This place feels empty to me. I want to turn it into something meaningful, not just for me, but for everyone who comes here. Sophie realized that behind Alexander's cold and powerful exterior was a lonely man carrying many emotional wounds. He wasn't just aiming to build a luxurious resort. He was searching for something deeper, perhaps a connection he had long lost. Have you ever had that before? Sophie asked gently. Alexander fell silent, lost in thought. Maybe, but I let it slip away, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. That conversation helped Sophie understand Alexander better, and he began to feel warmth from the young woman who was quietly reshaping his perspective. From discussing design, their conversations expanded to sharing stories about their lives, dreams, and fears. Sophie realized that despite being a powerful CEO, Alexander was just a man yearning to be understood and loved. In this budding connection, it seemed both of them had found something they didn't even know they were searching for. Chapter 2. The relationship deepens. That night, the sky above the Alps was like an enchanting painting. Thousands of stars sparkled across the dark canvas, and the moonlight draped the resort in a magical glow. Sophie stepped out onto the balcony after finishing her work, holding a cup of hot tea to enjoy a moment of tranquility after a long day. She hadn't expected to find Alexander already there, leaning against the railing, his gaze distant as he stared at the snow-covered peaks. Mr. Grant, Sophie said, a bit startled, I didn't think you'd be out here this late. Alexander turned to her, and for once the intensity in his usually stoic eyes softened. I just couldn't sleep, he said, offering a faint smile, and you don't need to call me Mr. anymore. We've worked together long enough to drop formalities, haven't we? Sophie smiled but kept a polite distance. Well, Alexander, would you like to talk? Alexander was silent for a moment before nodding. He motioned for Sophie to join him in the chairs nearby. The cool breeze swept past them, but the atmosphere between them felt unexpectedly warm. Do you know, Alexander began, his voice measured, when the last time I sat under the stars like this was? Sophie shook her head, curiosity lighting up her face. 5 years ago, he said, his tone carrying a mix of nostalgia and bitterness. Back when I thought I had everything, a flourishing career, a wife I believed was my perfect partner. Then it all fell apart. She left, and with her, she took everything I cared about, including my faith in people. Sophie could feel the deep pain in Alexander's voice. Divorce is always a difficult wound to heal, she said softly, but it doesn't define who you are. Sometimes those scars can make us stronger. Alexander let out a bitter chuckle, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. That's what I tell myself every day. But the loneliness, it's unbearable. In a world where everyone sees me as a cold, powerful CEO, very few remember that I'm just a man who also needs to be understood. Hesitant but empathetic, Sophie placed her hand gently on Alexander's, a small gesture but one filled with meaning. I understand how that feels, she said, her voice tender. When I was young, my mother passed away early, and my father worked day and night to support me. There were times I felt invisible, as if the world never truly saw me. Alexander looked at Sophie, his gaze shedding its usual coldness. You're not invisible, Sophie, he said, his voice warm enough to make her heart skip a beat. You have a unique talent, resilience, and understanding that I rarely see in anyone. His words made Sophie blush, her heart fluttering with emotions she hadn't anticipated. They continued talking, sharing struggles at work, fears of not meeting expectations, and unfulfilled dreams. Sophie spoke about her aspiration to become an interior designer, transforming rigid spaces into places brimming with emotion and memories. For the first time in years, Alexander felt he could open up completely without holding anything back. As the night wore on, a comfortable silence enveloped them. Sophie stood ready to bid goodnight, but Alexander stopped her with a gentle request. Don't go just yet. Stay a little longer. Sophie hesitated, her heart racing, but eventually nodded. Just a little longer, she said, trying to keep her composure even as her pulse quickened. They moved inside the elegant suite, where the soft glow of the bedside lamps created a cozier ambiance. Sophie settled on the sofa by the window, and Alexander poured 2 glasses of red wine, handing her one. Sitting closer now, the silence between them transformed into an invisible thread that tied them together. Sophie, Alexander murmured, his voice almost a whisper, you make me feel something I thought I'd never feel again. Sophie looked up, her eyes meeting his. In that instant, her defenses melted away. And you make me believe that trusting someone again isn't as terrifying as I thought, she replied. Alexander leaned in, his eyes searching hers for consent. Sophie didn't respond with words, but the way her hand gently touched his face was all the answer he needed. He pulled her closer, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both tender and filled with a fervent intensity. Time seemed to stand still, their pain and loneliness dissolved in the warmth of each other's arms. Sophie felt Alexander's sincerity and longing, while he found solace and hope in her presence. They were no longer CEO and employee, but 2 souls who had found each other amidst the chaos of their lives. As the first light of dawn streamed through the windows, Alexander gently brushed a strand of hair from Sophie's face as she lay nestled against his chest, her breathing soft and even. A sense of peace washed over him, a feeling he hadn't thought he'd experience again. Sophie stirred slightly, smiling in her sleep, and Alexander knew that this night had been more than just a physical connection. It was the beginning of something deeper, more profound, and he wasn't ready to let it slip away. Chapter 3, Crisis and Turning Point. Sophie left the Mont Blanc Royal Resort early one morning, her heart heavy but resolute. She convinced herself it was for the best. The moments she shared with Alexander felt too perfect to be real, and she knew she couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment. Alexander belonged to a different world, one of power, wealth, and pressures she couldn't fully comprehend. Despite her love for working at the resort, Sophie was just a temporary employee trying to save enough to pursue her dream. She returned to the small town where she had grown up, determined to start over. However, just weeks after her return, she realized something was different. The fatigue, bouts of dizziness, and morning nausea became impossible to ignore. After a visit to the doctor, she received life-changing news. She was pregnant, and not with 1, but 2 children. The revelation left Sophie stunned. She sat in her small room for hours, staring at the pregnancy test and the ultrasound image. Part of her wanted to rush to Alexander and tell him he was going to be a father, but fear quickly took hold. What would he think? A man like Alexander, scarred from a high-profile divorce, might suspect her motives. He might believe she was using this as an opportunity to tie herself to him, to climb into a life she never dreamed of. These thoughts compelled Sophie to remain silent. She focused on stabilizing her life, taking a part-time job at a small children's store and saving every penny to prepare for the arrival of her twins. Meanwhile, Alexander returned to the city with an unshakable sense of emptiness. After the night he spent with Sophie, he felt he had rediscovered something long lost: warmth, trust, and a flicker of hope. But upon returning to the resort, he learned Sophie had left without a word. Her sudden disappearance left Alexander baffled. He couldn't understand why she had vanished so abruptly. He sought answers, asking the resort staff, but no one could provide any insight. For the first time in years, Alexander realized he had grown accustomed to someone's presence so much that their absence now felt like a profound loss. One afternoon, while strolling through a small town near the resort, Alexander entered a children's store to purchase a gift for his best friend's son. That's when he saw her. Sophie stood in the corner of the store, holding a small, delicate blanket, her expression conflicted as she glanced at the price tag. She didn't notice Alexander until his deep, familiar voice broke the silence. "Sophie," he said. Startled, Sophie turned, her heart racing as she faced his astonished gaze. "Alexander," she stammered, instinctively taking a step back as panic surged within her. But his eyes quickly fell to her midsection, slightly rounded despite the loose coat she wore. "You're pregnant?" Alexander asked, his voice rough, his expression shifting from shock to an emotion Sophie couldn't fully decipher. Hurt, disappointment, but above all, concern. She lowered her head, unable to meet his eyes. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you don't have to worry. This is my responsibility, and I don't expect anything from you." "Your responsibility?" Alexander interrupted, stepping closer. "Sophie, this isn't just about you. That child, those children, they're mine too. They're ours." Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes as she looked at him. "I was afraid you'd think I was using you. I didn't want you to feel obligated to do anything for these children." Alexander shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "Sophie, the only thing I feel obligated to do is make sure you and those children are safe. I don't care about what anyone else might think or say. I care about you. I care about them, and I want to be here." Sophie was speechless, her emotions caught between relief and apprehension. For the first time in weeks, she felt a portion of the burden lift. But she also knew this was only the beginning. With the truth now out in the open, they had to face difficult decisions together, overcoming obstacles to build a future, not just for themselves, but for the two children whose lives were just beginning. Chapter 4. Alexander Faces Responsibility. Alexander stood silently by the large glass window in his luxurious apartment, the city lights reflecting on his face. The news of Sophie's twin pregnancy echoed in his mind, pulling him into a whirlwind of emotions. A man who had always been in control of every aspect of his life now found himself grappling with joy, anxiety, and the weight of responsibility. The next morning, Alexander appeared at Sophie's modest apartment. He carried a simple bouquet of white tulips and a large bag filled with books about pregnancy. When Sophie opened the door, her expression was a mixture of surprise and guarded composure. "We need to talk," he began, his tone calm yet resolute. Sophie placed her teacup on the table, avoiding his gaze. "Alexander, I know this is unexpected, but you don't have to do anything. I can take care of the children on my own." Her voice was steady, but Alexander could sense the worry hidden beneath her strong facade. He frowned, stepping closer. "Sophie, this isn't just about responsibility. I want to be here. I want to be part of our children's lives, and yours." She looked up, her bright eyes filled with hesitation. "I don't want you to feel obligated to do this. I don't want to be a burden to you, and I certainly don't want our children to be." Alexander sighed, his gaze softening. "Sophie, do you think I'm the kind of man who does things because I feel obligated? I'm doing this because I want to. You're the first person in years who's made me feel alive. I can't turn away from that. His words left Sophie momentarily speechless. She lowered her head, unsure of how to respond, but she didn't reject him. Alexander realized she needed time to process everything, so he decided to act rather than argue. The following day, he returned with a detailed plan, a schedule for prenatal care, ideas for renovating her apartment to make it suitable for raising children, and steps for planning their future together. "This isn't a suggestion," he said with a faint smile. "This is how I'm showing you I'm serious." Sophie couldn't help but laugh at his earnestness. "Do you always have to be in control of everything?" she teased, her tone lighter than before. "Only when it matters," he replied, his sincerity shining through. From that moment, their relationship began to shift. Alexander didn't just convince Sophie to let him help, he showed her that he genuinely wanted to do it for her and the children. Weekends became a time for shared errands as they shopped for baby supplies. During one visit to a baby store, Alexander stood perplexed before an aisle filled with diapers, holding 2 packages with different sizes and colors. "Why are there so many options?" he muttered, visibly overwhelmed. Sophie couldn't suppress her laughter, her gaze softening as she watched him. "Welcome to the world of parenting," she joked, and Alexander joined her in laughter. Moments like these revealed the human side of Alexander, the man who was earnestly trying to be a good father. But Alexander didn't stop at shopping trips. He suggested they attend prenatal classes together. Sophie initially resisted, feeling self-conscious about being there with him. However, Alexander's reasoning was hard to deny. "We're not just learning how to take care of babies," he said. "We're learning how to do it together." In class, Alexander surprised Sophie with his attentiveness and dedication. He took meticulous notes, asked detailed questions, and even practiced diapering on an oversized doll with comical seriousness. "You're very committed," Sophie quipped, watching him struggle to wrap a cloth diaper. "Wait until we practice with the real ones," Alexander replied with a grin. The classes became more than just a learning experience. They became a chance for deeper connection. After each session, they would often take walks in the nearby park, sharing their dreams, fears, and past. These long conversations helped them understand each other on a profound level. One evening, after dropping Sophie off at her apartment, Alexander paused at her door. He took her hand, his gaze serious but filled with emotion. "Sophie, I need you to know that I'm not here out of obligation. I want us to do this together, not because our children need me, but because I need you." Sophie looked into his eyes, feeling the weight of his words. She didn't reply immediately, but her gaze said everything. In that moment, they were no longer 2 people from different worlds, but 2 kindred souls ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Alexander's determination and Sophie's growing trust, they were ready to embark on a new journey, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter future, not just for their children, but for themselves as well. Chapter 5. Pressure from Society. News of the relationship between Alexander Grant and Sophie Hart spread like wildfire when a photo of them at a prenatal class was leaked. In the picture, Alexander was gently helping Sophie step through a doorway, his gaze full of care, while her arms lovingly cradled her rounded belly, signaling the imminent arrival of their twins. Within hours, major headlines exploded with sensational titles such as "Powerful CEO Falls for Commoner," "Truth or Scheme," "Alexander Grant's Unexpected Romance," and "The Woman Who Shattered a CEO's World." Meanwhile, at the Grant Technologies headquarters, Alexander walked into the boardroom with a steely determination. Around the table, members of the board exchanged tense glances, some openly disapproving, others discreetly observing him. Brighton, one of the senior members, was the first to speak, his tone sharp and accusatory. "Alexander, we've tried to stay patient, but this has gone too far. The media is targeting the company, shareholders are uneasy, and we need an explanation. A CEO of your stature cannot let his personal life tarnish the company's reputation." Alexander listened, his face a mask of calm. Rising from his chair, he spoke with measured precision, each word cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. "My personal life has not impacted the company's performance. We've met every revenue target, The stock value hasn't dropped, and our projects are on schedule. I fail to see why this warrants discussion." A sharper voice chimed in from the end of the table. "But a relationship with a former employee? Don't you think this invites scrutiny of your professionalism, especially when Sophie Hart is not from your social class?" Alexander's eyes turned icy as he locked onto the speaker. "I will not tolerate anyone here insulting Sophie. She hasn't manipulated me, and our relationship is no one's concern in this room. If anyone has an issue, they are welcome to vacate their seat immediately." Silence hung heavy in the room, the ticking of the clock the only sound. A few members lowered their heads, avoiding his gaze, while others appeared hesitant. Alexander knew he had cornered the board, but he didn't care. To him, Sophie and the twins were all that mattered. Elsewhere in the city, Sophie sat in front of her computer, scrolling through harsh comments about herself. Articles labeled her as a gold digger, someone exploiting Alexander to climb the social ladder. Each word felt like a dagger, piercing her self-worth. She didn't want to be a burden to him. After everything, the last thing Alexander needed was more trouble brought by her presence. Packing her small apartment, Sophie tried to suppress the pain in her heart. But as she zipped up her suitcase, a knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, there stood Alexander, his face etched with worry. "What are you doing?" he asked, his eyes darting to the open suitcase. "I think it's best if I leave," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "I don't want to cause you more problems. I don't belong in your world, Alexander. I'm just a burden." Alexander stepped inside, gently taking her hands in his. "Sophie, do you think I care about those meaningless words? You and the babies are everything to me. I won't let anyone or anything hurt you." Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at him. "But you'll lose everything. The board, the shareholders, your friends. They're all against us." Alexander tilted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "If they can't accept you, then I don't need them. You belong with me, Sophie, and I'll do everything to protect our family." The determination in his voice broke through her doubts. Though her heart was still heavy with worry, she couldn't deny Alexander's love for her. He wasn't doing this out of obligation. He truly saw her as an inseparable part of his life. The next day, Alexander held a press conference to address the public directly. Standing before rows of cameras and reporters, he declared with unwavering confidence, "I want to make it clear that Sophie Hart is not using me. She is the woman I love, the mother of my children, and the person I intend to spend my life with. My personal life does not affect my ability to lead or the success of this company." The statement sparked a media frenzy, but it also garnered public empathy. Critics began reconsidering their harsh views, while supporters of their love story rallied behind them. That evening, Alexander took Sophie out to dinner at a small, quiet restaurant, away from the flashing lights and prying eyes. Holding her hand across the table, his gaze was filled with warmth. "We've weathered the storm," he said in his deep, calming voice. "From now on, I won't let anyone or anything hurt you again." Sophie smiled, feeling the strength in his words. She knew that challenges still lay ahead, but together they could overcome anything. Their love, forged through trials and tribulations, had become unbreakable. Are you still following their story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback is invaluable to us. Chapter 6. A New Beginning for Happiness. Under the gentle afternoon sunlight, the Mont Blanc Royal Resort, nestled amidst the Alps, looked more vibrant than ever. Wildflowers bloomed along the banks of a crystal-clear stream that babbled through the valley. The crisp air, scented with grass and pine, brought a sense of calm to the distinguished guests attending a special event hosted by Alexander. It wasn't merely a lavish gathering, but a momentous occasion where Alexander publicly declared his love for Sophie, the woman who had forever changed his life. Sophie arrived at the resort, her steps tentative. She wore a pale blue dress that hugged her soft curves, accentuating her rounded belly, a testament to the twins soon to join their lives. From across the room, Alexander's eyes lit up as he spotted her. He strode confidently through the crowd, taking her hand as if it was the most natural thing in the world, drawing all eyes to them. Whispers rippled through the guests, but Alexander remained unshaken. His voice carried through the room, firm and resolute. "Ladies and gentlemen, today I wish to introduce someone special. Sophie Hart is not only the woman I love, but also the one I want to spend the rest of my life with. We are expecting two little angels, and I couldn't be happier to share this news with all of you." Applause filled the room, but murmurs of skepticism lingered in some corners. From within the crowd, Eleanor Grant, Alexander's formidable mother, emerged with a stern expression. As a woman of power and tradition, Eleanor was accustomed to the rigid expectations of high society and had never met Sophie before. "Alexander," Eleanor's voice carried an edge of disapproval, "are you certain this is the right choice? Can someone like her shoulder the responsibilities of our family?" Sophie froze, her hands trembling slightly, but Alexander, unwavering, tightened his hold on her hand and looked directly at his mother. "Mother, Sophie is not only a strong woman, but also the person who has shown me that love and sincerity are what truly matter. You'll see. She is not just part of this family, but its very heart." Eleanor frowned, her sharp gaze now tinged with curiosity. Sophie bowed her head slightly and spoke with a steady voice. "Mrs. Grant, I know I'm not perfect, nor am I what you might have wished for, but I love Alexander, and I'll do everything to be worthy of his love." The sincerity in Sophie's words left Eleanor momentarily unsettled. Slowly, the sharpness in her expression softened. "We'll see," she said in a measured tone. "Time will prove your words." As weeks passed, Sophie and Alexander prepared for the arrival of their twins. In the final days of her pregnancy, Alexander was always by her side, helping her through the fatigue and anxiety. He spent hours decorating the nursery, carefully choosing each tiny piece of furniture and decoration. Sophie felt his unwavering care and dedication, which deepened her love and trust in him. The day of the twins' birth arrived sooner than expected. On a snowy winter night, Sophie was gripped by intense contractions, signaling the moment had come. Alexander rushed her to the hospital, never letting go of her hand. His soft words of encouragement kept her grounded through the labor. When the first cry rang out, a healthy baby boy was placed in Alexander's arms. Tears glistened in his eyes as he gazed at the tiny, perfect face of his son. "My boy," he whispered, his hands trembling as he held his child for the first time. Moments later, Sophie gave birth to a beautiful baby girl with large, bright eyes. The doctor gently handed her to Sophie, and a wave of joy washed over her as she beheld her daughter's delicate features. Alexander leaned down, kissed Sophie's forehead, and whispered, "You did so well. You've given me the perfect family." In the warm glow of the hospital room, Eleanor appeared unexpectedly. She watched as Alexander lovingly tended to Sophie and their newborns, her stern demeanor giving way to a rare smile. When she finally approached the twins, she chuckled softly and said, "They're wonderful, Sophie. You've done an excellent job." Sophie looked up, her eyes red from tears but filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice trembling. Eleanor placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder, her gaze genuine for the first time. "You are part of this family now. Let's build a beautiful future for these children together." That night, as the snow outside ceased, Alexander embraced Sophie and the twins. Their little family, having weathered so many storms, was now enveloped in warmth and happiness. Sophie looked up at Alexander and softly said, "Thank you for always believing in me." Alexander smiled, gently kissing her forehead. "No, thank you for showing me that family is what truly matters." Outside, the glimmering light of the stars reflected through the window, heralding a new beginning full of hope for their little family. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. 1 year later, the lives of Sophie and Alexander had entered a new chapter. Sophie successfully completed her interior design course and opened a small studio specializing in creating warm, creative spaces. Alexander, after much contemplation, decided to reduce his workload at the corporation, allowing him to spend more time with his family. Every morning, Alexander took Lucas and Emma to the park, while Sophie focused on her work at the studio. In the afternoons, the family would gather to decorate their home together, from selecting room colors to arranging the drawings Lucas and Emma created. Their house in the Alps, where their love first blossomed, remained their favorite retreat, a place where they could escape the city and admire the breathtaking mountain scenery. Alexander continually supported Sophie, helping her build a network of clients and organize events for her studio. In return, Sophie taught Alexander how to balance work and family life, something he had never managed before. One summer evening, as the family sat together on their porch, Alexander watched Lucas and Emma playing on the grass. He smiled and took Sophie's hand. "I never thought I would have a life like this," he said, his voice gentle but full of emotion. "You and the kids are the best thing that ever happened to me." Sophie rested her head on his shoulder, returning his smile. "We've created this together, and I know we have many more journeys ahead of us." Their cozy home in the Alps became a symbol of love, companionship, and the belief that true happiness lies in the simplest things: family and unconditional love. The story of Alexander and Sophie comes to a close, but it leaves us with a profound reminder. Love and empathy can overcome all barriers, from social status to the scars of the past. When faced with responsibility and pressure, sincerity and understanding provide a solid foundation for building a relationship. Happiness is not found in perfection, but in overcoming challenges together, creating a family and pursuing shared dreams. Ultimately, commitment and trust will light the way, helping each person discover the true value of love in life. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Let us know your thoughts on this story in the comments below. What type of stories would you like to hear next? Don't forget to like, share this story. The chimes of Big Ben echoed across London as Veronica Clark hurried through the bustling streets, clutching an old briefcase tightly. The chilly March wind seeped through her thin coat, but it couldn't extinguish her determination. This wasn't just a job interview. For Veronica, this was her last chance to salvage her life and provide for Noah, her 6-year-old son she had promised to protect at all costs. "Do you think they'll give you the job, Mom?" Noah asked, his cheerful voice warming the frosty air. The little boy sat beside her on their final bus ride to West London, his wide, curious eyes filled with innocence. "I'll do my best," Veronica replied with a smile, though her heart churned with anxiety. "And you, remember to behave yourself with Miss Margaret, okay?" Noah nodded, his small hand clutching his familiar asthma inhaler. "I'll read my books and won't run around." The bus came to a halt in front of a narrow road leading to a luxurious neighborhood where towering trees shaded grand mansions. Veronica stepped off, the sound of her worn heels clicking against the stone pavement. Before her stood a massive iron gate, behind which loomed an imposing mansion with polished stone walls and large windows reflecting the pale morning sun. Taking a deep breath, Veronica pressed the gate buzzer. A stern female voice crackled through the intercom. "Ms. Clark, correct? I'm Mrs. Carlyle, Mr. Blackwell's housekeeper. Please come in." The gate opened automatically with a soft clank, and Veronica stepped into a sprawling, meticulously trimmed garden. Everything here exuded grandeur and coldness, as if designed to impress rather than to be loved. She shivered slightly, unsure if it was from the weather or the heavy atmosphere of the place. Mrs. Carlyle, a middle-aged woman with her hair neatly pinned up and sharp eyes, stood waiting at the entrance. "This way, please. Mr. Blackwell doesn't appreciate being kept waiting." Veronica followed her into the mansion, where opulence overwhelmed her senses. Soaring ceilings, sparkling crystal chandeliers, and cool marble floors. Despite the abundant light, the air carried an inexplicable melancholy. The doors to the living room opened, revealing Christopher Blackwell, a man seated in a custom-designed wheelchair, his presence radiating authority despite the weariness in his eyes. He regarded Veronica with a cold, gray gaze devoid of warmth. "You're the 7th candidate I've interviewed this month," he said, his deep voice tinged with indifference. "What makes you any different from the others?" Veronica swallowed, steadying her voice. "I don't just need this job. I'll do everything to keep it." Chris smirked slightly, a hint of curiosity flashing in his eyes. "Then let's get started. But don't get your hopes up. I'm not easily impressed." For Veronica, this was only the beginning of a challenging journey, but she believed she could endure it. She wasn't just searching for a job. She was searching for a brighter future for herself and Noah. Welcome to today's story. Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from so we can see how far this story reaches across the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul Stories to catch meaningful stories like this every day. Chapter 1. Struggles to Connect. The early morning sunlight streamed through the grand windows of the mansion, casting a glow on the polished marble floors. Veronica carefully arranged the care supplies according to the instructions Mrs. Carlyle had just given her. The thick notebook in her hands detailed Christopher Blackwell's routines and preferences, precise schedules, his preferred type of coffee, and his absolute intolerance for any deviations in his daily processes. Mr. Blackwell does not tolerate tardiness or carelessness, Mrs. Carlyle emphasized. You must remember that. And don't try to be friendly. He doesn't appreciate pity. Veronica pressed her lips together and nodded. She knew she had to remain calm and professional if she wanted to keep this job. But nothing came easy. Chris Blackwell, with his cold demeanor and sharp remarks, missed no opportunity to test Veronica's patience. Did you mix the coffee to the exact ratio? Chris asked as Veronica placed a cup on his desk. Yes, according to Mrs. Carlyle's instructions, she replied gently. Chris took a sip, then raised an eyebrow. Too bitter. Do it again. Veronica gripped the tray tightly, but she responded with a composed smile. I'll fix it right away. Despite the difficulties, Veronica remained patient. She refused to let Chris's cutting remarks discourage her, understanding that he wasn't just a demanding employer, but also a lonely man burdened by his own pain. She saw it in his eyes whenever he stared silently out the window. The challenges didn't end with the job. Veronica also had to balance taking care of Chris and looking after Noah. She needed to drop him off at school every morning and pick him up in the afternoon, all while constantly worrying about his asthma. One day when her babysitter unexpectedly canceled, Veronica had no choice but to bring Noah to the mansion with her. She explained the situation to Mrs. Carlyle, who reluctantly allowed Noah to accompany her. Noah's curiosity was piqued as he explored the grand mansion, his eyes lighting up at the sight of the paintings on the walls and the antique piano in the living room. But what fascinated him most was Chris's advanced wheelchair. Does it go fast, Mom? Noah asked, his face full of excitement. Chris frowned at the question and turned toward Noah. It's not built for racing, he replied curtly. Veronica quickly pulled Noah close. Noah, don't ask that. I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell. But Noah, in his innocent way, didn't stop. I don't think it's bad at all. I think it's really cool. I want to be an astronaut, so I want to build things like that. Chris froze. His eyes, usually filled with weariness and sarcasm, flickered with a hint of curiosity. An astronaut? He asked, his tone softening slightly. Yes, Noah nodded enthusiastically. I want to go to Mars and explore new planets. Chris said nothing more, but he seemed to quietly observe Noah for a little longer than usual. That afternoon, as Noah played with his toy blocks on the floor, Veronica sat by Chris, carefully reviewing the checklist of tasks. The usual tension between them seemed to have eased slightly. You always keep everything under control, don't you? Chris suddenly remarked. Veronica looked up at him. I don't have much of a choice. Being a single mother means always being prepared for everything. Chris smirked faintly but said nothing more. Veronica, noticing the lingering sadness in his eyes, spoke softly. Everyone needs help at some point, whether they realize it or not. Chris stared at her, as though weighing the meaning of her words. A moment of silence passed before he turned away, but unlike before, he didn't offer any rebuttal. It wasn't a major breakthrough, but to Veronica, it was a small step forward, and sometimes a single small step could change the course of an entire journey. Chapter 2. A Fragile Bond Forms. The Blackwell mansion in the afternoon exuded a serene yet distant beauty. The dark wooden walls and towering bookshelves in the library seemed to swallow every sound. After finishing her morning tasks, Veronica decided to try something new to soften the mansion's cold, unwelcoming atmosphere. She sat at the antique piano placed prominently in the library, lightly running her fingers across the keys. The room filled with the classical melodies of Debussy's Clair de Lune. Veronica wasn't a professional pianist, but she had learned the instrument as a child and knew how to infuse emotion into each note. Chris, seated in a corner of the room with his eyes fixed on his computer screen, paused as the first notes reached him. He said nothing, but his hands hovering over the keyboard stilled. Veronica continued to play, deliberately ignoring his usual cold gaze. When the piece ended, Chris turned his head, his expression slightly softer than usual. You play piano, he remarked evenly. Veronica smiled as she stood. Music makes everything feel a bit warmer. I thought you might like it. Chris didn't reply, but he didn't object when she began playing again on subsequent afternoons. While Veronica sought connection through music, Noah found a new fascination in Chris's impressive collection of astronomy books. One morning, as Chris read the newspaper in the living room, Noah approached the bookshelves cautiously. "Mr. Blackwell, may I borrow this book?" Noah asked, pointing to a thick volume with planets on the cover. Chris looked up, his piercing eyes scrutinizing the boy. "What does a 6-year-old want with that?" "I want to know why Mars is red," Noah replied earnestly, "and if people can live there." Chris's lips twitched in mild irritation, but instead of dismissing Noah, he gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit down. I'll explain." From a distance, Veronica watched this unexpected interaction, her heart warming. Chris, who had built walls around himself, was slowly letting them down thanks to Noah's innocent questions. One evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Veronica sat with Chris to review the next day's schedule. For the first time, Chris opened up about his life. "Have you ever wondered why I'm in a wheelchair?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the window. Veronica stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. "I had a skiing accident," Chris began, his voice heavy with sorrow. "One reckless decision, and I paid for it with my future." He paused before adding, "But it wasn't just me. My fiancée, she couldn't handle seeing me like this. She left not long after." Veronica's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. Chris shook his head. "Don't be. I've grown used to the solitude. It's how I live." Veronica realized that behind Chris's bitterness and detachment was a deep well of pain. Understanding this made her even more determined to help him open up. A turning point came one afternoon as Noah played in the library. Suddenly, he had a severe asthma attack. Veronica panicked, frantically searching for his inhaler, but unable to find it. "What's going on?" Chris asked, noticing her distress. "Noah, he's having an asthma attack," Veronica stammered, her hands trembling. Chris immediately moved closer. "Calm down. Give me the inhaler." I can't find it," Veronica replied, her voice breaking. Chris scanned the room, quickly spotting Noah's bag. He retrieved the inhaler and handed it to Veronica. "Keep his head elevated and help him take deep breaths," Chris instructed, his voice steady and firm. Following his directions, Veronica managed to stabilize Noah's breathing. As the boy clung to her, Veronica collapsed onto the floor, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said to Chris, her voice shaking with gratitude. Chris nodded, his eyes lingering on Noah. In that moment, Veronica saw a different side of him. Not the cold, bitter man he appeared to be, but someone who genuinely cared, even if he tried to hide it. That evening, after Noah had gone to sleep, Veronica returned to the library to thank Chris again. "I wouldn't have known what to do without you," she said. Chris shrugged. "He's a smart kid. I couldn't just stand by and watch him struggle." Veronica smiled, feeling the distance between them slowly shrinking. Chris didn't say anything more, but in his eyes, Veronica noticed a subtle change. It wasn't much, but it was meaningful. A fragile bond had begun to form, like a faint light breaking through a long, dark room. Chapter 3. Challenges and Secrets. The London sky bore a soft gray hue as faint sunlight filtered through the grand windows of the Blackwell mansion. Veronica, tidying up the library, accidentally nudged a bookshelf, causing it to slide back and reveal a hidden passage leading to the basement. "What is this?" she muttered, grabbing a flashlight from a nearby shelf and cautiously descending the stairs. The secret room unfolded before her like a forgotten treasure trove. The walls were covered with blueprints, schematics for motorized wheelchairs, and assistive devices. In the corner stood a dust-laden desk cluttered with incomplete models, as though time had frozen since Chris's accident. Veronica marveled at the ingenuity and creativity Chris once possessed. She quickly realized this was a part of his life he had kept hidden, a passion left behind in the wake of his trauma. That evening, Veronica decided to confront Chris. He was sitting in the living room, his gaze drifting aimlessly toward the garden. "I found a room in the basement," she began cautiously. Chris turned, his eyes instantly hardening. "You shouldn't wander around the house." "Chris, don't do this. I saw your designs. They're incredible. You once created ideas that could change the lives of millions." Chris smirked bitterly. "That's ancient history. I'm nothing now." "That's not true," Veronica insisted. "I see the potential in those designs." We can bring them back to life and make them a reality. Chris remained silent, his eyes reflecting inner turmoil. Her frankness stirred something within him. After a long pause, he sighed. Do you really think they're worth anything? I don't just think so. I know it. You're not just helping yourself. You're helping millions like you. In the days that followed, Chris began working on his designs again. With Veronica's help, they organized his documents and dusted off the remnants of his old ideas. Together, they sorted through the blueprints, selecting the most feasible projects. Veronica also reached out to tech companies and charitable organizations to seek support. Noah became an integral part of the project, his curiosity fueling endless questions about how the wheelchairs worked and their voice command features. One evening, as Chris and Veronica discussed technical details, Noah chimed in, Mr. Chris, what if your wheelchair could stop automatically when there's something in the way, like a car does? Chris looked at the boy, momentarily surprised. That's an excellent idea, Noah. I'll write it down. Noah's small but creative contributions not only advanced the project, but also inspired Chris. He began spending long hours in the workshop, seemingly rediscovering himself with each prototype and test run. However, their progress was disrupted when Victor, Chris's brother, unexpectedly arrived at the mansion. Tall, impeccably dressed, and with sharp, calculating eyes, Victor stormed into the living room like a whirlwind. Chris, Victor began, his tone authoritative, you need to stop wasting time on this nonsense. Sell the company and enjoy life. You're no longer capable of running it. Chris gripped the armrest of his wheelchair tightly, his expression darkening. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Victor shrugged, his gaze sweeping disdainfully over Veronica and Noah, as if they were mere obstacles. You know the company's value is plummeting. We need to focus on profitable ventures instead of these meaningless charity projects. These projects aren't meaningless, Veronica interjected firmly. We're creating something that will have a real impact on millions of lives. If you can't see that, maybe you're the one who shouldn't be in charge. Victor froze, his expression shifting from irritation to surprise. Who are you to speak like that? I'm someone who sees that Chris still has the power to make a difference. He doesn't need you or anyone else to belittle him. Chris glanced at Veronica, a mix of gratitude and admiration filling his eyes. For the first time in years, someone had stood up for him in front of Victor. Victor sneered. Fine. If you want to waste your time, so be it. But don't say I didn't warn you. He turned on his heel and stormed out, leaving behind a tense silence. After Victor's departure, Chris sat in quiet contemplation. Veronica joined him, resting a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to prove anything to him, she said softly. You just have to believe in yourself. Chris nodded, a rare smile gracing his lips. Thank you, Veronica, for believing in me, even when I couldn't. The once cold mansion now felt warmer, filled with the shared efforts of the three of them. Victor's challenges only strengthened their resolve, not just to prove that Chris could achieve greatness, but to affirm the importance of pursuing meaningful goals. Their bond grew stronger, like a flicker of light in the darkness, steadily growing brighter and more resilient. Are you still following the story? Leave a comment with smile to let us know you're here. Don't forget to share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. Chapter 4, A Shared Mission. The morning in London was brisk, but the atmosphere inside a bright, modern conference room buzzed with intensity as skeptical gazes from potential investors bore down on Chris and Veronica. Standing beside Chris, her hand clutching a stack of presentation materials, Veronica exuded a calm confidence. Meanwhile, Chris sat composed in his specially designed wheelchair, his face serene, but his eyes ablaze with determination. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris began, his steady voice commanding attention, the designs I am about to present are not just technological innovations. They are opportunities to restore freedom and dignity to those with disabilities. I know this because I've experienced the loss of that freedom myself. Chris launched into his presentation, showcasing wheelchairs integrated with AI technology, features like adjustable height and voice recognition, allowing users to control the device with simple commands. Some investors initially wore expressions of doubt, raising pointed questions about feasibility and market potential. Sensing the rising tension, Veronica stepped forward. "These designs are not just about convenience," she said with conviction. "They're tools for life-changing impact. This is an opportunity to invest in humanity and meaningful innovation." An older investor leaned forward. "Ms. Clark, why do you believe in this project so strongly?" Veronica drew a deep breath. "Because I've witnessed the miracles these designs can bring, not just for Chris, but for my son as well. These ideas are not merely technology, they are hope." Her heartfelt response softened the room's mood. By the end of the tense presentation, they secured commitments from several investors. Chris and Veronica left the conference room with a sense of relief and excitement for the future. As time passed, Chris's new company began operations and quickly gained recognition. The advanced wheelchair designs received positive feedback from trial users, including hospitals and nonprofit organizations. Noah became the project's unofficial young ambassador, participating in presentations and offering a child's perspective on the technology's ease of use. His enthusiasm not only charmed attendees, but also reignited Chris's creative spirit. Yet just as everything seemed to be progressing smoothly, Veronica received a job offer from a prestigious NGO in Manchester. The higher salary and stability left her conflicted. Accepting the position would mean relocating and uprooting Noah from the life they had begun building with Chris. One evening, Veronica and Chris sat in the library, the flickering firelight casting shadows on the dark wood-paneled walls. "Chris, I've received a job offer," Veronica began, her voice steady but tinged with hesitation. "I haven't decided yet, but if I accept, I'll have to leave here." Chris's heart sank at her words. "It's a good opportunity. You should pursue it." "But I'm not sure." Veronica hesitated. "We've been working so well together. I don't want to lose that." Chris inhaled deeply, his eyes meeting hers. "Veronica, I don't want you to stay because of me. I want you to stay because we're building something meaningful together. If you leave, I'll support your decision. But I hope you see this place as more than just a job. It's a family." Tears welled in Veronica's eyes. "I'll think about it," she whispered. While Veronica was still mulling over her decision, Victor returned unexpectedly, armed with legal documents aiming to take control of the company. During an urgent meeting at the mansion, Victor declared that Chris was unfit to manage the business and threatened to take him to court. "Chris, you must understand that this company is our family's legacy," Victor said, his tone laced with arrogance. "You're gambling it away on projects with no future." For the first time, Chris didn't shy away. "Victor, this isn't just our family's legacy. This is an opportunity to change the lives of people like me." Victor smirked. "Do you really think you can beat me?" "He doesn't have to," Veronica interjected firmly. "Chris has a team behind him, people who believe in his vision, and I'm one of them." Noah, standing nearby, stepped forward and took Chris's hand. "Uncle Chris taught me not to be scared of bullies, even if they're bigger than me." Victor froze, speechless. Seeing Chris supported by Veronica and Noah, he realized his once unshakable authority had waned. After a long pause, Victor stood. "I'll let the courts decide," he said before leaving. Later that day, Chris returned to the library. Veronica and Noah were there, sketching ideas for new projects together. "Thank you," Chris said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I could have done this without you two." Veronica smiled warmly. "We're a team, remember?" Chris nodded, feeling a lightness in his heart for the first time in years. Their bond had grown beyond professional collaboration into something deeper, a new family built on trust, support, and love. The challenges ahead no longer felt like barriers, but stepping stones for their shared journey forward. Chapter 5. Love and Transformation. The charity gala took place in a luxurious hotel in central London, where shimmering lights reflected off glass walls and the elegant attire of the attendees. This was more than just the launch event for Chris's assistive technology company. It was also a moment for him to honor those who had walked with him through his journey of struggle and triumph. Chris, dressed impeccably in a black suit, sat center stage. His gaze no longer carried the sorrow of years past, but was filled with pride and determination. Around him, photos and videos showcased prototypes of AI-integrated wheelchairs. symbols of a brighter future for people with disabilities. As the stage lights focused on him, Chris began his speech. Years ago, I thought my life was over. My accident didn't just take away my ability to walk, it took away my hope. But today I stand here, not only to launch this company, but to thank the people who helped me rediscover the meaning of life. His eyes searched the room until they landed on Veronica and Noah, sitting together, radiant and attentive. Veronica Clark, Chris continued, his voice trembling slightly, you taught me that limitations only exist in our minds. You didn't just help me face my pain, you gave me the courage to overcome it. And Noah, you are my greatest inspiration. You've shown me that nothing is impossible if we have faith and passion. The audience erupted into applause as Chris concluded with an important announcement. I dedicate all of our achievements to those who refuse to let physical limitations define them. From this day forward, we will work tirelessly to ensure that technology isn't a privilege, but an opportunity for everyone. After the gala, in the tranquil garden behind the hotel, Chris and Veronica stood together under the soft glow of lanterns. Noah darted around the garden, laughing as he chased fireflies. Veronica, Chris began, his voice warm and steady, there's something I've been wanting to say for a long time. She turned to him, her clear eyes filled with understanding. You and Noah haven't just changed my life. You've become the family I always wished for, but never thought I'd have. I don't just want to work with you. I want to build a life with you. Chris pulled out a small velvet box, revealing a beautifully crafted ring. Veronica Clark, will you marry me and build a family with Noah and me? Tears streamed down Veronica's cheeks as she nodded, her radiant smile lighting up her face. Yes, Chris, I will. Nearby, Noah raced over and threw his arms around both of them, shouting in joy, I'll have a real family, I'm so happy. A week later in the workshop at the mansion, the three of them worked together to assemble the first prototype of a new wheelchair design. Noah sat on the workbench, carefully handing tools to Chris, while Veronica helped double-check the components. Mom, Uncle Chris, we're like a superhero team, aren't we? Noah asked, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Exactly, Noah, Veronica replied, bending down to kiss his hair. We're a team, always. Chris smiled, his gaze filled with love as he looked at them both. And this team isn't just changing our lives, it's going to change the world. Noah's laughter filled the workshop, blending with the hum of tools, symbolizing a new beginning, a family built on love, trust, and transformation. Thank you for following this story. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to share with your friends, like, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales.